All right, today we are going to break down one of the most influential and, let's be real, one of the most notoriously difficult academic books of the last few decades. Judith Butler's 1990 masterpiece, Gender Trouble.
So here it is, published back in 1990. This book sent massive shockwaves well beyond the walls of academia, and it fundamentally challenged the way we even think about who we are.
And its impact was huge and it was immediate. As scholar Anthony Elliott put it, the book pretty much became the foundational text for what we now call queer theory. It gave a whole new generation of thinkers and activists a new language to work with.
Okay, so what's our game plan for unpacking this? First, we're going to look at the trouble that started it all. Then we'll dive into how Butler questioned the whole idea of woman as a category. That leads us right into the book's most famous concept, that gender is a performance. From there, we'll get into the really wild idea that biological sex is also a construct. Then we'll see how things like parity can actually be a form of protest. And finally, we'll wrap up with the book's incredible legacy.
So, Section 1, a foundational, troubling text. What was the trouble that Butler was even writing about? Well, to get it, you have to understand a core idea that a lot of feminism was built on at the time.
See, the basic assumption was that there's this single shared identity of women, and that this group needed to be represented as one voice in politics and in language.
And this is exactly where Butler comes in and makes their first really big move. They looked at that core idea, this universal concept of woman, and they basically started pulling at all the threads to see if it would unravel.
So the book asks this really critical question. When we talk about feminism fighting for women, who exactly are we talking about? And maybe more importantly, who gets left out of that picture? Is that category really as universal as it sounds?
Butler's point was that a single term like women kind of flattens everyone's experience. It can accidentally erase the very different ways people are oppressed based on their class, their ethnicity, their sexuality, all these other intersecting parts of who they are.
This whole critique then leads us directly into the absolute heart of the book. This is its most famous and probably its most misunderstood idea, the theory of gender performativity.
And to really get a handle on this, you have to ask yourself a pretty basic-sounding question. Is your gender something deep inside you, something you just are, or is it something you do? Butler's answer is pretty mind-blowing. They say gender is performative. Now, that does not mean it's fake or that it's a choice. What it means is that there isn't some true gender identity inside of you. Instead, your sense of gender is built up piece by piece through all the tiny repeated actions, gestures, and ways of speaking that you do every single day, most of the time without even thinking about it. And all those little repetitions add up to create this powerful illusion of a solid, stable gender inside.
And here's the key difference. This isn't a performance like an actor on a stage. An actor puts on a costume, plays a role, and then takes the costume off. There's a real person underneath. With performativity, Butler is saying there is no original identity underneath. The performance itself is what creates the identity. It's like we're all unconsciously following the social script that tells us how to act out man or woman. But hold on, because Butler doesn't stop there. They take this idea and push it one step further, challenging another huge assumption, the nice, neat line we draw between biological sex and cultural gender.
You know the common view, right? Sex, male or female, is seen as a simple biological fact of nature. And then gender, masculine or feminine, is the cultural meaning we just sort of layer on top of that biological reality.
Butler comes in and says, nope, that distinction is actually a fiction. Their argument is that we can't even understand or talk about biological sex without looking at it through the lens of our ideas about gender. The way we categorize bodies is already shaped by culture. And that leads to this incredible conclusion. It's not just gender that's a social construct. In a way, sex is too.
Okay, so this is where the theory gets really political. If gender is just a script that we're all performing, Butler asks this amazing question. What happens if we start messing with the script? What happens if you perform it differently? This is where we get the trouble in Gender Trouble. Butler talks about subversive bodily acts, using things like parody and exaggeration to pull back the curtain and show everyone that the rules of gender are kind of arbitrary. The perfect example of this, of course, is drag. For Butler, drag is way more than just a show. It's a really smart form of cultural critique. It playfully makes fun of the whole idea that there's an original or a real gender by showing us that all gender is a kind of script, a kind of performance. So finally, let's just take a moment to look at the incredible, lasting legacy of this book since it came out.
I mean, think about it. It comes out in 1990. Through the 90s, it becomes this absolute cornerstone of queer theory. And then, fast forward all the way to 2018, and you have protesters reading the entire book aloud outside the Hungarian parliament. Its power and relevance have clearly not faded.
So if we had to boil it all down, what are the big takeaways? Gender trouble really forces us to see identity not as some fixed thing inside of us, but as something that's constantly being built and rebuilt. It's unstable, it's fluid. The crucial point is that it's less about who you are deep down and more about what you do day in and day out.
And that really leaves us with the book's most powerful and lingering question, one that feels more relevant today than ever. If our identities are just performances, well, that means the script can be rewritten. So what new roles are out there, just waiting for us to perform them? What does that mean for the future of who we can be?